Jon Gruden was on Barstool, as he does at least weekly, with Dave Portnoy. And Dave Portnoy asked him a simple question. Would you have benched C.J. Stroud and put Davis Mills in the Patriots game? Here's what he had to say.
I can't say I would have done that. I might have. I mean, obviously, on the very first play of the game, he threw a duck 5 yards behind a wide open receiver. The conditions bothered him. Maybe he should have wore a glove on his hand. I don't know, but the ball placement was terrible. I thought the play selection, two of the interceptions, they ran naked bootlegs to his left in horrible weather, and it resulted in two interceptions, but they couldn't run the ball either, Dave. Woody Marks, 14 carries, 17 yards, a fumble. They had nobody to throw to, nobody to hand it to, and he couldn't throw in bad weather, and the Patriots beat the hell out of him.
Yeah, okay. So he didn't quite answer the question. Hopefully the title to this isn't too misleading. But I thought he brought up 3 points there, a couple of which I hadn't really thought about or addressed. One, the sloppy weather and how they could have handled it. 2, the play selection, so shots fired at Nick Caley there, and then 3, their inability to run the ball. As far as the sloppy weather goes, and the suggestion to maybe wear a glove, some quarterbacks just despise the notion or the thought of that. I think this is the one thing that's clear about C.J. Stroud over these first few years. I'm not comfortable that C.J. Stroud can perform well in sloppy conditions. I know people love to bring up the cold and a domed team in cold weather. I've been in Houston and see C.J. Stroud have a hard time with his ball placement when it's just a slight drizzle, when there's precipitation. Remember last year, a couple years up ago in Cleveland, when it was raining, it wasn't cold or anything, but when they were having that training camp practice, it was a drizzly day, and the precision just wasn't there in the passing. This is something that I'm concerned about, and yet at the same time, it's something that you can overcome. And to go back to the Patriots, well, what have we always heard about what they did up in New England? Dropping the ball in water, imperfect footballs, old sloppy beat-up footballs that they would practice with to make conditions as tough as possible. And I don't know to what degree they do that. I asked somebody to ask Nick Caserio at the press conference if that's something that they do, since I won't be there. But it's an issue that every quarterback has. Obviously, Drake May had issues with the precipitation and the wet football in that game. He just handled it better than CJ did. But it's enough of a recurring theme now that it's something that CJ's got to address. I did a video yesterday about the things that CJ can address in the offseason, and I don't think I addressed this specifically. If CJ needs to go and fly all of his guys up to Canada in February and March to get used to throwing in sloppy, wet snow, do that. Just whatever you can do to simulate those conditions and get better at that. This team, if CJ Stroud is their quarterback for the next 10 years, no matter how great they do, it's probably not going to be having nothing but home playoff games. They're going to have to play in the wet and the wintry mix. Wintry mix are the worst conditions possible. That's something that it frustrates me, and yet at the same time, it is something that you can address. So we'll see about that. There's so many things that some guys just don't like not having precision in practice, and coaches are like this as well. Coaches don't like screwing everything up by making it any worse than it needs to be. But this is clearly a barrier and an impediment to the Texans progressing on. If their quarterback, and C.J. Stroud's going to be the quarterback next year at least, they gotta get past that. Second was the play selection, and this is where I disagree with Gruden. Yeah, they ran a couple of bootlegs to the left. On that first one, CJ just doesn't have to throw the football. Obviously, he can just eat it. B, he's trying to get people open, and he did. I think Caley in both these playoff games did a good job, and especially in that game with the Patriots when you have no Nico Collins, you don't have Dalton Schultz. You did at the point of that first interception, but still, you're trying to find ways to get guys open when you don't have the talented players, the best playmakers on your team out there. I excuse Caley for that. And again, to go back to CJ just having to be better throwing a wet football in bad conditions, I would lay more of that on CJ. And then just the dumb bad luck of not having your best playmakers out there. And then the third one, not being able to run the ball. I mean, some of that's tied back to what Gruden, as he's criticizing Caley for the play calling. Yeah, they couldn't run the ball. They didn't have the wide receivers or the receiving options out there that they'd like to have. Joe Mixon not going to be out there anytime at any point last season, and I'm growing. I've already been pessimistic, but I'm increasingly pessimistic and don't really factor him in to any kind of solid offseason plans. We have no idea. I don't think Joe Mixon himself might really know what the situation with his leg is and if he's going to be able to play again, whatever it might be. It's just it's a medical mystery at this point, and I don't think that's some huge cover-up by the Texans or anything, that they just haven't been able to resolve this, or at least they weren't able to by the end of the season. So, I know Joe Mixon wants to play by virtue of him posting on social media that he wishes he was out there during that game, but we just don't know if his leg/foot is going to go along with it. If you think about their inability to run the ball, and we go and we look at just that first bootleg. So we'll watch it. We'll run it through the first time. I'm going to point out those two guys. But just as a refresher, since you've already watched it 50 times, but a 51st time would be just great. You look at the defensive end down here, or the edge rusher, and this is the guy that you're trying to dupe with the play action. And you're going to want to also keep an eye on him. So as the play starts, it's run action away. You want the edge defender to come down and play the run. He already is kind of aware there might be play action he has to worry about, but then he looks up and he sees Cade Stover up there, or is that Harrison Bryant? Harrison Bryant up there, and the next read after the defensive end goes down is, all right, is Harrison Bryant going to be trying to kick me out, or is he going to release on a pass? But because Ariante Ursary gets knocked back so far, it screws everything up. And at that point, the deception all falls apart. He's in CJ's face before CJ has a chance to do anything. I thought the play design was fine because if Ariante Ursary doesn't get driven back so far, the edge rusher is probably going to have to hesitate a little bit. And at that point, whether Harrison Bryant engages him and blocks before he releases, or if he just releases free, CJ at that point has both either Harrison Bryant or Jaden Higgins open, and it's an easy throw despite the weather conditions. I think that Nick Caley's just fine. I think Nick Caley's going to be here. Now, I say just fine. I think Nick Caley earned a shot to get a second go at it this next season, and really it's him and CJ really just refining and hammering out all of the nuances in this offense, but then especially also bolstering the offensive line. Now, I covered CJ yesterday. CJ's got a lot to work on. The interior offensive line and the offensive line in general, we just can't go through this ordeal where anytime you face a team that has dominant interior defensive linemen, you can't beat them. You can't run the football. You're averaging 2 yards per carry. They will see in good weather conditions and bad at NRG Stadium and on the road. It doesn't matter. They're going to see dominant interior defensive linemen, and they can't let those guys throw such a wrench into the offense. And that starts with getting better players on the inside. I think Cole Popovich did a great job this year. I think they were an improved offensive line, but being improved wasn't good enough to be a genuinely good offensive line. But I do think Cole Popovich has them on the right track, and that includes Nick Caley. That's going to help out C.J. Stroud, obviously. C.J. has a lot of stuff to work on as well. But that... I don't know. What do you guys think? I think Gruden would have benched him. I haven't gone through his history of everything. Yeah, every time I see film from this game, it looks worse and worse. Wins are not QB stats as a response to somebody else, I'm sure. I can't escape CJ no matter how hard I am. I know. I've got a topic list. I don't have it around here anywhere. I've got 15 different topics that I want to get to, and I find myself having a difficult time moving on from C.J. Stroud, partly because there's so many people like Jon Gruden and otherwise notable people in the national media speaking about C.J. Stroud, and the refractory period for me has gone from me being as irate as I could possibly be on Sunday night to now trying to hey, whoa, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater, or let's not throw out the baby with the wintry mix. Just let's have calmer heads prevail and figure out what we can do here. I do think that CJ's got to prove it this year, and the circumstances around him will improve. I think the defense is set up really well to bring back all of their starters. The notable guys who are free agents are either some of the rotational defensive tackles or Danico Autry, and other guys that, for the most part, by and large, including those defensive tackles, the Texans have been able to bring in all of those guys other than Danico Autry, who were brought in on like 1 and 2 year contracts. So the defense is set. There's going to be, churn to some degree, but you can spend your resources on the offense. You can spend it in the draft. You can spend it in free agency. You can maybe stretch a little bit beyond your comfort zone on an offensive lineman. I think Nick was in on the bidding for a few of those premier offensive linemen last year, and I think he made the sensible financial decision. But unfortunately, also one of those free agency acquisitions was Cam Robinson, who didn't work out. Trent Brown worked out awesome, but Trent Brown needs to be a swing tackle. Trent Brown needs to be a guy that you're starting simply because, Titus Howard is at right tackle because we actually feel good about our left guard, and Ariante Ursary has come along. There's a place for Trent Brown and potentially another young offensive tackle on the roster as your swing tackles. On the interior offensive line, though, you've got to have a couple more studs in there. I think there's a place for Ed Ingram, but it's not ironclad. Like, all three of those guys are potentially replaceable. I'd love to see Ed Ingram alongside a stud center and a stud left guard. But, I mean, this last year, the first half of the season was a competition between Juice Scruggs and what's his face there, and they. And then neither of those guys ended up even being viable options on the interior. Lake and Tomlinson, thank you, for the rest of the. So it was just a mess. It was a mess, and they have to be more aggressive this offseason. And I trust that they will be. I think they will be. It'll be interesting. I don't think Nick's going to tip his hand in his press conference tomorrow, but maybe he will. Maybe it'll be like an exceedingly early Christmas.